It was a dark and stormy night, the kind of night that sends shivers down your spine. The wind was howling and the rain was pelting against the windows of the old mansion on the hill. Inside the house, a group of friends were gathered around the fireplace, trying to keep warm and pass the time. As they sat there, telling stories and laughing, they suddenly heard a strange noise coming from upstairs. It sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate, as if someone or something was walking around up there. At first, they tried to ignore it, thinking it was just their imagination playing tricks on them. But as the footsteps grew louder and more persistent, they knew that something was definitely not right. One of the group members, a brave soul, decided to investigate. He slowly made his way up the creaky staircase, his heart pounding in his chest with every step. When he reached the top, he found himself in a dark hallway, illuminated only by a flickering candle that seemed to be moving on its own. Suddenly, he felt a chill run down his spine, as if a cold hand had just touched him. He turned around, but there was no one there. Just then, he heard a faint whisper in his ear, a voice that seemed to be coming from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. "Get out," the voice said. "Leave this place before it's too late." The man was frozen with fear, but he knew he had to get out of there. He turned and ran down the stairs, almost stumbling in his haste. When he reached the bottom, he saw that his friends were waiting for him, their faces white with fear. "What happened?" one of them asked. "It's the ghost," he gasped. "We have to leave, now." They all grabbed their coats and ran out of the house, not looking back until they were safely outside. As they stood there, catching their breath, they saw a figure in the window of the mansion, watching them with an eerie glow in its eyes. The ghost of the old mansion was still there, waiting for its next victims. And nobody would ever forget the terrifying night they encountered the spirit that still haunted the halls of the old mansion on the hill. It was a dark and quiet night on the deserted highway. The stars were shining bright, and there was no sound except the gentle hum of the car engine. Suddenly, a strange incident occurred that left everyone on the road baffled. As the car approached a bend, the driver saw a figure in the middle of the road. It was a woman, dressed in white, with long hair that covered her face. The driver tried to avoid hitting her but failed, and the car collided with the woman. The driver quickly got out of the car and rushed to check on the woman, but she had vanished. There was no sign of her anywhere, and the driver was left standing there in confusion. The only evidence of the incident was a small dent in the car's front bumper. Shaken by the experience, the driver got back into the car and continued driving. A few miles down the road, the driver saw the same woman standing in the middle of the road again. This time, she was not alone. There were several other people with her, all dressed in white and with their faces hidden behind their hair. The driver tried to steer the car away from them, but it seemed like they were surrounding the car, and there was no way to escape. Suddenly, the car's engine started to malfunction, and the lights began to flicker. The driver was trapped, and there was no way out. Just when things were about to take a turn for the worse, the strange figures disappeared into thin air, leaving the driver alone on the deserted highway. The car's engine miraculously started working again, and the driver quickly drove away from the eerie scene. The driver could not explain what had happened that night, and the memory of the strange incident haunted them for weeks. They never found out who the mysterious figures were, or why they appeared on the highway that night. It was a strange and unexplainable experience that the driver would never forget. Once there was a winding road in the middle of the woods that was said to be haunted. The road was called Devil's Bend, and it was rumored that anyone who drove down it at night would encounter the ghost of a woman who had died in a terrible car accident years before. Despite the warnings, a group of friends decided to take a drive down Devil's Bend one dark and stormy night. As they drove, the rain pounded against the windows and the wind howled through the trees, making the road seem even more ominous. Suddenly, they saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. It was the ghost of the woman, dressed in a white gown and glowing eerily in the darkness. The driver slammed on the brakes, but the car wouldn't stop. The ghostly figure approached the car and began to beckon to the group of friends, calling to them in a haunting voice. They were frozen with fear, unable to move or speak as the ghostly woman drew closer and closer. Just as it seemed the ghost would reach through the windshield and grab them, the car suddenly jerked to a stop. The friends looked around in confusion, realizing that they were no longer on Devil's Bend, but on a deserted side road. Shaken but relieved to have escaped the ghostly apparition, the friends drove back to town in silence, wondering what had really happened on Devil's Bend that night. Some say they never drove down that road again, while others still wonder if the ghostly woman is still waiting for her next victim on that haunted road.